I leave you the floor. Thank you.
So welcome back. I'm a bit bummed that I don't have a buddy next to me if I look at the previous presentation, but I think it will go perfectly. So I will be sharing indeed how to make UX matter, more specifically, lessons learned from Infrabel in building user-centric design in large-scale enterprises. So it's a bit of a mouthful, but we'll get through it. What does it feel like to do UX in large-scale enterprises? Very concretely, it feels like half the time I'm designing and the other half explaining why these designs are not decorations. But we'll get to that. First, I would like to introduce myself. So I don't know, a couple of people know. My name is Ricardo. I'm a UX design consultant at CBTW. I have a background in communications and graphic design. I've been doing UX for a couple of years right now. And mostly I've been dropped into an environment that is large, complicated, sometimes messy, but that's what I also like to do. At the moment, I'm based in Brussels at Infrabel, which is the beast we are trying to tame. But a bit more concretely, what is Infrabel? Infrabel, for you who don't know, is Belgium's national railway infrastructure manager. So basically it means they build, they manage, and they maintain the tracks, the signal posts, tunnels, bridges, and IT systems, everything to do with the railway in Belgium in general. Infrabel is the boss, I would say. Infrabel is about 10,000 employees, 3,602 kilometers of railway tracks in Belgium. It's very specific. Last year they had 245 million passengers going through the network, as well as for 55 million tons of merchandise. So it's quite an important enterprise. Another interesting figure is 1,200 of daily trains pass through the north-south junction. I don't know if you guys know, but in Brussels, the north-south junction starts at Brussels South, which is about 23 tracks. It has to go to Brussels North, which is about 17 tracks, but it goes through all 6 tracks. So there's like a real bottleneck in Belgium. And apparently 1,200 trains a day have to go through that bottleneck. So it's quite a management, to put the least out of it. And lastly, there's an infinity amount of internal applications in Infrabel. At least that's what it feels like. And I will also show you why. This is an architecture of Infrabel. All of these squares are different tools, databases, which ideally we are tasked to redesign and to get on one line. But what is it like doing UX at Infrabel, and specifically in large legacy organizations? You might recognize some of these for your project. First of all, UX is seen as a nice to have as opposed to a must have. Business needs are more important than user needs. We have businesses who think they're doing agile, but actually it's waterfall still. So waterfall is very much alive, but just with the side of bureaucracy. And the digital maturity throughout the different teams, we notice, is not consistent. So it means that some teams are more digital mature, other teams are less. So there's very much a silo throughout Infrabel, which we also kind of have to break through. So we had a choice. Either we complain or we start changing. And so we put in a framework, we put in a game plan, which is our mission at Infrabel, the UX mission, which is we divided into 4 pillars. There's quite a lot of text, but I'll go through it quickly. The first is setting up a design system, so everything is at least consistent, look-wise, feel-wise. The second is getting UX involved from the very beginning, so in a user-centric way, doing everything correct from the beginning. The third is defining governance, which means basically explaining how UX should be done within Infrabel. And the fourth, which is the last, and I think one of the most important, is to launch a user experience center. So basically centralize all the UX knowledge, people, as well as tools. So there's really a center that everyone can go to, as opposed to that everything is scattered around the whole enterprise. It's not very revolutionary indeed, but it is very needed. What we noticed though is we weren't going to change minds just by saying it. We needed to go back to the essence, so it's being credible. That's the only way that we were going to motivate and really show the people, the stakeholders, that UX actually matters. So to understand a bit of where we had to come from, so this is UX culture before we actually arrived, you'll see that UX was driven by developers with no user needs in mind. There was no UX standards at all. There was also no attention to web accessibility guidelines. We noticed when we looked at the tools ongoing that it's a mix between outdated tools that looked like it was built in 2004, as well as some modern tools that weren't really aligned when it comes to user experience. We also noticed that the interfaces that were designed by the development reflected the system logic as opposed to the questions that the user has, the tasks that the user has, and the needs. And I think I'm referring back to that architecture. If that's complex, think about how complex one specific tool can also be. And the last is there was no user research or testing or any kind of feedback loops really done within Infrabel. So it was very important for us also to instate that. To give you more of a visual example of what the tools look like, this is an example called Bookin. It's an application that's used to request train paths. As you can see, this is the home page, but it's a redundant page. You can't do anything on this home page. You would think that this is a button. Think again, it's just a title. So you can't do anything except for accessing the menu. So why land on it? We don't know. If you dive a bit deeper, you see it jumps all of a sudden. This is what a table looks like. At first glance, you say, it's just a table, but we can already see some accessibility issues with the red on the blue. All of these icons on the left are icons, correct, but they're also buttons that lead to different places and that have different actions. And the user doesn't know what those buttons do unless you maybe hover over that for 2 seconds, and maybe you can figure out if I click on this, then it will open that application. So as you can see, not the best user experience. Another great example is called EPP Web Portal. This is an example I would like to think that development thought they were being quite creative. As you can see, you have 2 main tools, and then you have this beautiful mosaic. This mosaic shows you all the different locations in Belgium. This is just all different buttons that lead to a different location doing the same thing. So in essence, you have 63 buttons already on this page. Not the best navigation. And lastly, we have a tool called Traffic Info. This tool is, in essence, Traffic Info is just to have more information on the traffic on the net. But as you can see, the brand guidelines, I don't know if you know Infrabel. Infrabel is very blue. Yellow is not part of their brand guideline, but yet they reinstated that. It is an application that is made for mobile. It's not really mobile friendly. It's quite small. These buttons are not according to web accessibility guidelines, so there's also an issue there. And of contrasts, it's made for mobile, but it could definitely be better. And so for us, what was important is to start with the credibility and not the creativity. We weren't going to wow the people by being creative. We really had to show how UX can solve problems. And so once we accepted that we weren't going to make beautiful designs, UI designs to push through, or we weren't going to make flashy animations, we got to be practical and very practical without overlooking the necessary steps. And so the toolkit that we had for mind, it's the steps that we always do for new projects, is obviously implementing a design system, creating a design system, but once we have that design system, also using that with every single application, so we create consistency throughout all those infinity amount of applications. What was also important for us is to start with the design workshop before we actually start designing. So having a design sprint together with the stakeholders to figure out who the tool is for, the personas, the user journeys, but also what the vision of the product should be. Also going a step back, looking at the tool, how it is today, and figuring out, is there something that works? Is there something that doesn't work? Are there features that are missing? What needs to be changed? What doesn't need to be changed? Really going into that conversation with the stakeholders before we actually start doing any designs. Then we do the first wireframes, and actually quite fast we go back to the stakeholders to have co-creation. So we have it in design critiques. You can also see it a bit as co-creation, but we show the first instance of wireframes to the stakeholders to ask them, okay, is this how you envisioned it? Are we missing something? Does this work for you? Really get them on board of contributing to the product, which will help for the internal advocacy, but I'll get there. The next step is really testing those tools with real users. I must admit, at Infrabel, we're still not there 100%. We are starting to test, but they're very picky with who we can test with, which is not the essence of having a user test, but we'll take it, and then hopefully we can improve on that. But if we do all of these 4 steps correctly and properly before, we create advocates of the stakeholders. So the stakeholders start seeing UX as credible, they start seeing how UX can solve problems, and they hopefully see that it's much better after we design it than before design it. And that's important because these stakeholders start advocating UX to different stakeholders on different projects, and so they start coming to us with the question of, okay, can UX be included on this project as well in the redesign? And lastly, service design. It's not something that we really focus on, but it's definitely something that we have to do. And again, taking a step back to that architecture, it's a mess. Sometimes we have to figure out, okay, this tool, is it part of a bigger journey? So taking a step back, looking holistically. If it's part of a bigger journey, it kind of has to follow the same style. So service design is always part of it. I would first like to show you the design system that we actually managed to create. And then I can also show you how we use the design system to create, for instance, a new design. And then I will go on with the rest of the presentation. But normally I have linked it. Let me see. Voila. So this is our design system. This is the cover. On the left, you can see that it's divided all in different categories. So for instance, if you go to foundation, you'll see for instance, the grid system, the colors, typography, everything is documented very thoroughly. So in the light version and the dark version, to see the difference. For typography and for grids, it's not really that important, but if you come to the components, it becomes really important to see, okay, this is what the component looks in the light version, this is what the component looks in the dark version. And then, as you can see, we have all different pages for buttons, for form elements, for navigation. But if you, for example, take form elements, you would see, you can see you've got counters, you've got date pickers. On the left, we have the component and then the documentation. More specifically, what it looks like, the best practices, the different states of that component. So we really document everything thoroughly, how it works, but also, for instance, the anatomy, the spacing, as well as variations, and more importantly, the accessibility. So everything has to be documented, also for development, because this gets developed into a design system website, which the development can then take those components, they have the code already, start implementing it. So we really work on component base. How would that look like if you make a new screen? So I've kind of prepared at least the basis of a screen to not waste too much time, but I'm going to change the background quickly so you guys can see it up. So as you can see, the screen, we have 2 components already. We've got the left component, which is the side navigation, and we got the component at the bottom, which is a footer. But we can also add new things. I have to see quickly, because voila, say we add a title. I can start by welcome John, maybe I don't think I wrote John correctly, but having a small up. Then we can say, okay, this is also all part of the design system. Typography, it's an H1, so we added, I wrote Japan. Voila, we can add, for instance, let's see. I'll have to do it differently. I forgot the shortcut, but I think it's because I'm looking at it. But either way, I think we can just add it this way. Search. There we go. So we can add a search of, for instance, this. We can make it full width. I feel like an old guy right now. And then we can also add more and more things. So if we add another one, for instance, a table, then we more or less on a home page that could exist. Voila, table. We can add that underneath it. And then this will also make full width. And so what the design system allows you to do is we can go into the actual component, we can customize it where needed, we can delete things, we can change, for instance, this column. We actually want it to be a content column, so we can change that into voila, content column. In this column right here, we actually don't want to use all of these illustrations. We don't want it, so we take off the illustrations, and it's very easy to make designs because we spend so much time on building that design system in general. And then what you can also do, for instance, is look if we expand it, how it will react because it's responsive. So that's a bit of the product of having a full design system that actually Nicolas has really painstakingly helped build, but it helps us in the long run. So now that we saw a bit of the design system, what was more important, and also because it's already it has a firm basis ground, it's important to start with some pilot projects. So the pilot projects aren't difficult projects, but they're projects to really showcase what the design system can do, and more important, what a UX team on those projects can also contribute. So the first project, one of the first pilot projects was TMS Web. TMS stands for Traffic Management System. Basically, it's just an application that, if I'm not mistaken, the signal posts have to can go on to figure out how the trains drive. This looks super complex, but this whole graph actually comes from a different system. So designing this tool wasn't that complex if you don't have to design the actual graph. I could explain this graph, but I don't think you guys are that interested in it. The next tool is ADL. Basically, ADL is a tool to give speed advice to train drivers, which means that when before a train driver leaves, they have to keep their train number, and then the whole screen becomes one big black screen with a very big, this is how much you are allowed to drive. It's very simple. Why do they do this? One is to avoid any confrontation, and two is to save on energy. But voilà, you can already see how it more or less looks like. The issue now with scaling it up to all the different applications possible at Infrabel. So all of these white tags are different applications. This is an example of applications that are part of the customer solution. Next to customer solution, we also have traffic safety solutions, real-time traffic management, as well as capacity management. So as you can see, quite a lot of applications. I think we are busy with or have finished around 10, more or less. But it's just to show you how extensively the ecosystem is. We also needed a way to actually more or less show our progress. So this UX maturity framework of Nielsen Norman Group actually really helps with that. For you who don't know, the 6 stages of the UX maturity basically tells you how mature the organization is in UX user experience. It's not that difficult, but it starts, it has 6 stages, 6 steps. It starts with UX being absent, then step 2 is limited, step 3 is UX being emergent, 4 is when UX is quite structured, the 5th is when UX is integrated, and by the 6th, when UX is user-driven. As you can read, dedication to UX at all levels, which results in exceptional user-centered design outcomes. Right now, we believe that be confident we are in number 4, which is structured. UX is quite structured. We aim to obviously be 6. We already think that we are with a couple of feet in number 5, integrated, but I think a key step there is from the moment UX becomes an integrated part in the UX governance, and UX is a mandatory step, then we would really consider it to be integrated. And I think Alexander is really busy trying to figure out how we can get that mandatory step implemented. Now, of course, it's not all smooth sailing. Sometimes it feels like we are walking through mud. An example, what I call the wall of blockers. These are quotes that we heard in the past. Sadly enough, we sometimes hear today as well. Not today, but these days. One of them is, we've already done it this way, so why should we change? Or the users are used to doing it the old way, so why change? Another one is UX UI is going to slow us down. We want to keep it the same, we just want to redesign. Okay. Another one, it doesn't need to be responsive. So they say our users, they only use desktop, so no need to make tablet, no need to make mobile. Okay. One of my favorites is development has already started, or the backend has already been developed, so now you have to redesign it, but keep in mind the backend has been developed and we can't change it. And also this one is a bit of a pain, in my heart at least. Figma designs are more of a guideline, which I found irritating because we go through the whole workshops with the stakeholders, we make sure that they are on board. We have all those wireframes, all those UI designs approved by business, and then development says, it's a bit difficult that, but we can change it, but it's better for the users. Figma, it's more of a guideline anyway. So it caused real tensions, and these are some other tensions as well, but our job is to actually obviously circumvent those and go into conversations to show how UX contributes as opposed to, I don't know, what they think make it worse. But these are some tensions that also exist. So the teams have different processes because it's very siloed. It could also mean that different teams have different IT systems or different development code languages, or they work on an IT system that is a version before or version after. Makes it difficult to implement a structured delivery. There are some key roles that are missing, again, going back to the fact that they like to think of themselves as being agile. Key roles like product owner, business analyst, tech analysts, sometimes if they are missing, it makes our job just a bit more difficult. We have to figure out who to speak to that actually can make decisions. If analysts are not there, those analysis sometimes fall on our plate to do next to design work, so it makes it a bit of a real tension. There's slow delivery. There's also resistance to change culturally. I'm not going to go deeper into that. And then the two last ones are development-wise. So often we see, not often, sometimes we see that the development team is already staffed before the scoping has been done, which means that the development team is waiting for designs, and because designs aren't done, they have to start somewhere, so they start working on the back end. And so in parallel, the backend is being developed, and when our designs are done, they say, but it's not correct anymore because the backend has already been developed. And, yeah. And then every developer also believes they are a UX designer. I don't know if you guys have noticed that. Often when they talk to us, they are convinced that their solution is for the better. I know I'm complaining a little bit, but it wasn't all that bad. We actually managed to do quite a lot of things. One of the things we managed to do, which is this slide, is obviously the design system that you guys saw. We built a living design system that is being used in over 10 internal applications and counting. We set up a UX governance with structure and fewer let's just wing it moments. We have a bunch of user tests that work. Some of them were proper, some of them were not that good, but they were all valuable. Then we have users are talked about and being included in business decisions, which is just a big win, I would say. So stakeholders that have worked with us, they see the credibility of UX and they start taking the user perspective into their business decisions. And the last one is we turned UX into something people ask for as opposed to us pushing it. And what's more, Infrabel has just already started selling solutions to other countries. So it means what we're doing is working. Thank you. This is just an example of what a design sprint looks like. So what we do beforehand, we go through the product vision, just a screenshot, and here we go through the design critique of how the tool looks before, what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be changed, what doesn't need to be changed. But having that conversation beforehand with the stakeholders really helps us when we start designing to do it correctly from the get-go. This is an example of a user test. There's not much else to say about it, I don't think. I blurred the user out of privacy, but voila. But more importantly, the results. So how did this result in applications that we have redesigned? I will show you a couple. The first one is Icarus. As you can see, it looks a lot better, but it doesn't only look better, it actually works better for the users who are wanting to do the tasks that they need to do. By the way, all of these applications I'm going to show are currently in production. So that's good. So this application, Icarus stands for Infrabel Capacity Requests Unified System, I think it was. Anyways, it's a tool used to request a track to park your train on. So say a train comes into the country but only leaves the next day, they need to park it, and there are specific tracks reserved for parking. The issue is if more than one what we call railway enterprises, which is basically the clients of Infrabel, like an NBS, SNCB or a Linias, if more than one requested, then there becomes a sort of confliction, and they have to go in what we call a coordination procedure, and they have to go into dialogue with each other to figure out who gets it. And so it could be for one track, it could also be for a lot of tracks. And so this specific screenshot is showing that process. Right now they're in step 2 in dialogue. There are no meetings left. The user has to agree to the meeting minutes or not to go into the next step. For the assignment to happen, the assignment obviously agreed on what has been said in those meetings. So again, this is just an example. The next one I'm showing in the dark mode because I think our dark mode also looks pretty good. It's called Inca. Inca stands for Infrabel Composition Application. So basically it's an application to make your compositions. Every single train driver in Belgium for freight trains have to give their composition through to Infrabel. So they have to say exactly how long the train is, how many wagons are on the train, how many, if there are any containers on those wagons, if it's a tank wagon, at which position those wagons are, if there are any dangerous goods on those wagons, which locomotives they are using, how many locomotives they're using, what's the location of those locomotives. So it's quite a lot they have to, give through to Infrabel. And before they've done it in a very complicated way, or they've done it via Excel, we try to get it more interactive so they can actually see the train they are building. So they can see perfectly, okay, this wagon is on place 1, place 2, they can actually build it, which is also important to have an overview because apparently the wagons with the dangerous goods always have to be in the middle. It's important for Infrabel to know exactly which wagons is where, because if there's a crash, for instance, they need to know which substances they are dealing with. Voila, and if obviously they clicked on it, you can see the details of the wagons, the container details with the actual containers on it. But in essence, a much more interactive way of doing this. The next tool is called Traffic Info. Traffic Info is a tool for the candidates to go on to see the status of the stations, the network, the trains. The specific screenshot is for the trains. They can see exactly if the train has deviations, what stations it needs to deviate from, and exactly how many stations it needs to deviate from. For example, at the bottom you can see all the live times, so you can see if it's on time, it's all real time, which is important for the candidates to also have. And lastly, we have DF Mobile. So DF stands for Digiform. Digiform is, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's basically if something goes wrong, if something happens on the network, the train driver has to contact the signal post and have to explain what has gone wrong. Before they used to do it with pen and paper. They used to have to phone them and have to explain everything. We are trying to digitalize that into obviously an application. So they give in what is going wrong, and they just have to go into dialogue with those signal posts. But it's something specifically for if something goes wrong on the network. What is interesting with this one is that there are guidelines of how designs should be for train drivers, which are more stringent than the general web accessibility guidelines. As you can see, everything is a lot bigger, the buttons are bigger. So it was because of that guideline. I think it was a PDF of 60 pages that Nicolas had to go through, which meant that we actually had to make a parallel design system focused on these guidelines, which are more stringent. But so you can see a train driver can use it as well. So we get a bit to the end, a bit lessons that we took out of it. At the same time, it's key takeaways, I would hope, for you guys. We listed 5. The first is start small, show value early. So you build credibility with pilots and not necessarily with frameworks. The second is speak the language. Business likes to speak about impact and not necessarily about pixels. The third is respect the beast. So if you want to change legacy, you can't do it overnight. You have to work with it, don't work against it. Find a way to change it from the inside and don't go butting heads. The fourth is process is power. So a repeatable UX process is the only way to scale credibility, because you're pushing it through to all the project and then they can see, okay, it's constant, it's credible, we want it by us as well. And the last one, don't wait for perfect, don't wait for perfection. A good enough wireframe is a good start to go to the stakeholders, to have that discussion with them, what works, what doesn't work, have the co-creation to get them on board. But you don't have to wait until it looks perfect to go to them to have that conversation. Voilà, so that was a bit our story. If you guys have any questions, I would love to hear them.
Thank you very much, Ricardo. I think you encapsulate a lot of struggle we can encounter as UX designer in a larger company. So I'm willing to give the mic to anyone who has a question in the audience. Yes.
First of all, amazing job. Looks good.
Thank you.
You said this is the design system we came up with. You said with we, how many people and how long did it take? And how much could you take from previous maybe design system that you made to then reuse some best patterns in this one?
So the design system is actually built on the PrimeNG way of working, because we have to connect it with development. If we say we, it's a UX team at Infrabel. How many people worked on it at that time? I think it was around 2, 3.
2, 3 at a time, but in total like more than 6 in total designers working on the design system.
And it's also a living document. So every single application we make, if you notice that a certain what's it called?
Sorry.
Component, needs to be expanded. If it's not included into the design system, we have to add it. And so every single designer that does an application has to go back into the design system and change it. So whether or not it's done, it's definitely not done. It's a living document. But I don't know how long it took, but I think it was the first project that I had to work on, which was the basis of everything, as you can see. Once that is done, you can start implementing it into the rest. I don't know if I answered your question more or less.
Yeah. When did you start working on it?
When did we start working on it?
2 years ago, something like that. And if you want to know, we worked about 4 to 5 months on the design system, if I remember correctly. Something like that.
You're welcome.
Thank you. That was great. I'm curious to learn how you, from the respect the beast standpoint, navigated sometimes the business logic is so complex, and making even one tweak to a flow can mean work from other teams, which in my experience has always put a huge stopgap in my my progress with, certain tasks. With such a large enterprise and so many applications, how was that navigated, and how do you successfully make it to the other side of getting, the budget for that? Like, 'cause more people now have to be involved, other teams have to be involved, like all of that.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think it's a struggle that we definitely face even today. If you want to change something that is connecting to applications, or if you want to change how one application views it, but the other application views it differently, then there's a bit of butting heads. They figure out, okay, which one do we go for, which one don't we go for. It's a struggle, to be sure. I would say the solution there is just do as much as you could. You just really have to convince them of why your design would make the most sense. Try to get the other team on board. If it's not necessarily the case, you would have to look at it more of a long-term vision. So sometimes you have to give a bit to receive. And if you give a bit and it ends up obviously reiterating further on that it doesn't work, you can always go back to what you have proposed. But me as a designer, I really like to push for my designs. At Infrabel, I've noticed that it's not always the outcome, and you just have to accept it. Sometimes you have to accept that it's not your design necessarily. They want something else. Your task is to go into that vision that they then have and try to get it as good as possible, even though it's not the vision that you have foresaw, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the really great presentation. Super interesting and super complex, obviously. And I have so many questions, so I'm trying to decide which one is the best one. I know, I'm sorry. I'm renowned for asking questions. So, okay, when it comes to okay, so like for example, you define like a kind of UX strategy, right? You said at one point that there's like a moment where you're doing like wireframing, like low fidelity wireframing. If I understood correctly from your presentation, that's already at that point where you're having discussions with, you're having technical discussions, like you have technical stakeholders that are, you have analysts, you have potentially developers. Is it at that point that the buy-in that you're seeking buy-in early on at that point, or is it? Are there different rounds of like buy-in, let's say? Like, is that, yeah.
I would say the initial buy-in obviously happens before the project is sold internally, before you actually start the project. Once that you start it, indeed, ideally we go with low fidelity wireframes, but because our design system is so thorough already, we are able to really show quite detailed already what it could look like. We don't fixate on pixels, but we show quite detailed what it could actually look like as opposed to low fidelity. But to answer your questions, we have those workshops indeed with the product owners, we have it with business analysts, there's a technical analyst hopefully on board as well, a head of a design team, a development team, so we have those people in the workshops so we don't miss anything. At the end of the day, it's the product owner that really gives the go, no go. But they give their perspective and they push, obviously, out of my experience, there are product owners that really ask those perspectives as well internally. But the reason we do it is because at the end, those designs need to be approved, and that's the, let's say, the final design that development then has to implement, and that changes afterwards don't really go because business hasn't approved on it. That's why we try to get all the profiles within that workshop to have all those perspectives as well. And it could also be a perspective of development that says, actually, this is technically not really feasible. Maybe we should rethink this, and then we take a step back. We go into co-creation with them to see what would work for development.
Clear, thanks.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, so at the beginning you showed us how many different internal tools were going on at the same time at Infrabel. I don't know much about trains, but from what I gathered, all the tools that you showed were mostly aimed to professionals of the sector, so maybe technicians, train drivers, I don't know, yeah, the world of trains, but a lot of, not especially you are not here, you are not trying to sell to the average nobody, let's say, not nobody, but you know what I mean. So I was wondering how much time and effort did you put into actually trying to figure out what are the needs and expectations of all those different sectors of the same company, because it seems like you were really working to deliver solutions to a lot of different profiles and different users.
Yeah, good question. I think the positive thing that we have is we are overarching different teams, and the teams have done a lot of analysis themselves. Obviously, it's their project, their application, so they have a lot of analysis. We dive deep into that analysis as well. We ask the business analyst who, hopefully, if they've done their job correctly, has all that insight. Sometimes we go into conversation with the end users if it's easy to obtain, if the end users are the people working at Infrabel, for example. But as I stated, Infrabel is quite hesitant for us to talk with users if it comes to their clients. So if it comes to a Lineals, if it comes to an SNCB. The reason for that, I think everyone has different reasons. They're all, for me, excuses. But one of the reasons I heard was because if I would have a conversation with one client, Infrabel has to invite all of the clients, because only one client can have an input. They can only be the ones who have a say. Everyone should have a say then. So then we have to invite all the clients, and there's no, there are no resources for that. So to get to your point, analysis is done by the business analyst, hopefully on the project. We dive deep into that analysis, but it's also the point of having that design sprints workshop beforehand to really figure out, okay, what are the needs, what are the users, what are the personas, what is the user journey, so we don't miss anything. Does it answer your question?
No.
All right.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that we have also a developer from CBTW at Infrabel. Can you just talk a little bit on how it's helping you advocate for the design system, the way you're working, how is like working with you and.
So we actually have a couple of developers from CBTW at Infrabel, but we work closely with two. So we consider that being the design system team, because we often have to change things in the design system. One of the development is more on Angular, the other one is more stylistic. But they often help also push towards other developers how the design system works, what it should be able to do. If we make new components, it's often those two also the ones that make those components nice, working for the design system, so that the development on the specific projects can just take it and plug it in. But I must admit, those two, being the Angular developer and the stylistic one, more front end, are the two that are really pushing the design system towards the other development teams, which is a good collaboration we have with them.
All right. Sorry, we're gonna wrap up on that question. But Ricardo, I guess you're still available for one-to-one question. I'll invite you to still enjoy the buffet. And
before we leave, it wouldn't be a UX Beers if I didn't make a little bit of self-promotion. So we do have a newsletter every month that comes out from the product design team. The previous edition was on why service design is key to smooth digital product experiences. Every newsletter tackles product design topics, service design, UX design, conversation design, but you can definitely subscribe, or if you subscribe to our LinkedIn, you'll also see it appear there every month. Voilà.
Thank you.